Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. So this is the start of our December, or not December, it is December, it's the 15th of December of 2024, but our January reviews and the 2025 jump into fairy tales, mostly. Yeah, we're going to be covering The Lion King next month because I covered The Princess and the Frog already, but at least those are the films. We'll be dealing with some African-American book fairy tales. So, we'll be covering Frozen this month, and Frozen 2, and I think I have an Olaf film, and then a Hans Christian Andersen direct story. So we're going to be talking about The Snow Queen, which, yes, the Disney film is inspired by is probably the closest thing. And I've already filmed those. So this is the original tale. Now I read this on my tablet. I'll probably link a free version from the Project Gutenberg because it's not in copyright anymore because it's old. So this is an interesting story with him. It's very much seemingly designed to be read in parts because it is in parts. And it starts off, and apparently this varies by what you're reading, with either the devil, a demon, some sort of magician or sorcerer, can't remember which in the version that I read, creates this mirror that shows evil, basically. If a good person looks into it, they see horrible things. And eventually his minions or his demons take this and are running around Earth showing everybody and freaking everybody else out and having a grand old time doing this because, again, they're demons or there's kind of evil creatures. And then they try to take it up into the sky. And kind of to show the angels in heaven. And of course they don't get there and it shatters everywhere. And some of them end up as regular mirrors, and then some end up in tiny little splinters, which is what is the important thing that is part of this story, is they end up in tiny little splinters and periodically end up in people's eyes and hearts, and they see evil things. So then we go on to a story of two small children by the name of Kai and Gerda. They live in a tiny little village that's crowded together, and their houses are next door to each other. And there's not a lot of room for gardens, so their parents have these garden boxes up in the garret, which is the attic. And the children play there, and they grow up together, and they're very close friends, and kind of talks about them, and they are the kind of main characters. So then one spring, Kai gets something in his eye and somehow in his heart, so he gets the splinters of this mirror, and he starts becoming very mean. So he starts teasing Gerda. He doesn't listen to his grandmother. Now, before this, that winter, he sees the Snow Queen, because their grandmother talks about, it's like the snowflakes being almost like bees, and they have to have a queen. So they have the Snow Queen, and apparently the actual Snow Queen comes and peeks into the window and terrifies Kai. So again, the spring comes, he gets these splinters from this mirror in his eye, and his heart becomes very, very cruel, and is picking on Gerda and is being mean. Winter comes, and he takes his sled, and apparently in the town square, a lot of the young boys do this. They hitch the little mountain sleds, or sledges, to people's actual kind of carriage, like horse-drawn or reindeer-drawn sleds. And he hooks his up to this other person's they doesn't recognize, and this person takes them eventually out of the town and they disappear. Turns out this is the Snow Queen. She stops, she brings him up, he's cold, she kisses him, and he forgets all about his grandmother, all about his home, all about Gerda, and she, and essentially he becomes numb to the cold. So she takes him back to his castle. So Gerda, so now Kai is missing. So, and people kind of assume that he's dead. So when spring comes, Gerda, thinking he drowned in the river, because that's what people expect, goes and tries to give her shoes to the river to see basically if they'll tell her where Kai is. And the river just kind of throws them back. And then she ends up in a little boat trying to get her shoes in the water as a offering. But the river takes her down to a, depending on the story, the sorcerer or a witch home. Now this witch sorceress is neutral. She just wants Gerda. So, and one of the big things that Kai and Gerda did was roses. And so she makes all the roses disappear from her flower garden. And she just wants a companion. So she decides to keep Gerda. And she hides all the roses so Gerda will forget about Kai because she's told her story. That she's looking for her friend. This lasts for a little while until she sees roses in this woman's hat and remembers. And she goes and starts talking to all the flowers in the garden. And they don't kind of give her strange little answers here. Eventually she talks to the roses and it's like, he's not dead. Otherwise we've been underground and we have not heard anything. So she leaves and runs into this crow. And it's either a crow or a raven. And she tells him her story, and he thinks that Kai went to this princess who wanted a prince or a husband who was as intelligent as she was. So, and his female crow lived inside the castle. So they get her snuck inside the castle. It is not Kai. But she tells this prince and princess her story, and they send her off in clothes. Now, mentally, it is now fall. So it's fall. So the entire almost spring and summer passed while she was in that garden. So they give her a carriage and nice clothes and stuff and send her off to try to find Kai. Well, she's taken over by a group of robbers, and there is a daughter of them who decides to keep Gerda as her pet, so to speak, as her companion. And she shows them that she has these birds and that she has this reindeer. She periodically uses her knife on the reindeer's throat just to scare the crap out of it. And she holds tight to Gerda when they go to sleep. Well, Gerda listens to the birds, and she tells her story to the birds, and they say, "Oh, we know him. He's with the Snow Queen. She basically she passed by us and most of our babies died except for us two. And he's with her in the Lapland, which I believe is their term for Finland. So they must be in Norway. Though, of course, Hans Christian Andersen is Dutch. But nonetheless. And then she talks to the reindeer, and he knows where this is. And eventually the robber girl lets her go and puts her on the reindeer and said, okay, it's like the men are gone, my mother's asleep, go. So the reindeer takes her, and we move on and all of these are done in separate stories. The first part of it with the mirror is one story. Then you have the story about Kai and Gerda, and then Gerda's story where she goes and gets stuck with this magical woman is another story. The Crow and the Princess is another story. The Robber Girl is a third, and the following story is the Finn Woman and the Lap Woman. So that's the story where we're at. So we go, and she basically, her and the reindeer go to run into this Finn Woman who lets Gerda get warmed up, and here's those stories, and like she wrote down a piece, or okay, go to her. The Snow Queen is this way. So they go to this woman who looks at things, and the reindeer asks, like, how is she gonna get Kai out of her out of the spell that he's under. She's like, Gerda has all the power she needs. Power is love. So she sends them off. The ranger drops her off at this rose bush, and then he leaves, and she goes, and she's walking through this, and she's essentially being attacked almost by snowflakes, and then she starts to recite the Lord's Prayer. Remember, Hans Christian Andersen is very religious. So she's reciting this, and essentially little angels appear and protect her from, and basically get rid of these snowflakes that seem to be attacking her until she's able to reach Kai. And the Snow Queen is not there. The Snow Queen is also apparently tormenting some volcanoes. But he is sitting on the ground messing around with what amounts to be a puzzle. They call it a Chinese puzzle. And the Snow Queen had told Kai that if he spells out the specific word, he'll be his own master, basically. And he's supposed to spell out the word eternity. And Gerda sees him, she runs to him, and she holds on to him, and she cries. And her tears rinse out the splinter from his eyes. And then his own tears basically melt his heart. And so they then leave, and the puzzle fills out the word, so it's now fixed. So it's eternity, and you do not see the Snow Queen again. So they leave, they get on the reindeer, they go back, and this is the final story. So once she's done with the Lapp woman, you move on to the Snow Queen's palace, and that is the final story where they come together, they get on the reindeer comes with a companion, and who's apparently had a baby, and they drink deer milk directly from the deer. Yeah, there does get some, that is one of the weirder parts of this original tale, is they nurse on a deer because apparently they need to. And they get the deers and they go back. They run into the robber girl who's now left her family and taken the carriage and things that Gerda had been forced to leave behind, is now traveling the world. The crow that Gerda originally met has passed. His wife is now a widow. The prince and princess are also now traveling the world. The children finally get back home, and they've grown up. They have become adults. So somehow in the course of this, they've become adults. They are now, and of course they're still very, very close. But yeah, it kind of has that weird mystical thing where they've now come and they return home to his grandmother, but they've now become adults. And that is the end of the story. So it's a very interesting tale. Mostly it is focused on Gerda's tale of trying to find Kai. You don't actually see a lot of the Snow Queen. She shows up in the second part of the story where she first scares Kai and then ends up taking him. And then you don't hear about her again till Gerda finds out from in the story where she's with the robber girl that he's with the Snow Queen. So you do, and then you never see the Snow Queen again. And you just see her palace and see Kai. So it's interesting. The Snow Queen really isn't a villain so much in this story either. I mean, yes, she kind of takes Kai, but she doesn't actually take him because he's become nasty and hooked his little sledge up to her sleigh. And then she does actually kind of kidnap him, but he's already his heart's already frozen at this point. So she holds him. And then the rest of it is very much Gerda's trials and tribulations of getting to Kai and her love healing him. And I am sure there's some, and then them coming back being adults. I'm sure there's some sort of interesting religious metaphor going on here. Um, Possibly due to the fact that females have to, their love can heal a male, but I'm not, this is just entire speculation. It's a very interesting old tale. Um, and yes, there's very, obviously there's a religious overtones with this because it's Hans Christian Andersen. We'll touch more on that when we do the Little Mermaid, which is a little bit more on the gruesome side. With Hans Christian Andersen, him and his fairy tales. Not to mention, Hans Christian Andersen was weird. He was very, very, very weird. So he had some social issues and was apparently very, very annoying to people. But nonetheless, it's an interesting fantasy tale. I do have another video where I have a picture book of it, which cuts out all the religious stuff, oddly enough. Or it's kind of the basic tale, and it doesn't have them grown up as adults at the end. But again, it's an interesting story. I'm sure that when children read this back in Hans Christian Andersen's day, it made a lot more sense. But again, it's a very interesting set of little tales. Debating on how on earth we should categorize this. As homeschoolers, if you're studying Hans Christian Andersen, it's certainly it is one of the more classic tales to cover. It's an interesting winter story to talk about. If you're talking about Hans Christian Andersen, if you're talking about religion of the time and metaphor, it is also very, probably very interesting. You could probably do some interesting deep dives into this. I'm not sure I would read this to small children. It doesn't make much sense. It's very weird. And again, I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff, metaphor and stuff that I am absolutely, utterly missing out of this as a non-religious person. I do have it pulled up here on Wikipedia, but I don't think, yeah, they're basically, it's summer and they're now grown up. And then it ends with the grandmother reading a passage from the Bible, which is, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will be by no means, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. I have no idea what that means. It's from Matthew 18:3. Again, I'm not religious. I do not understand this. Basically, I'm guessing what it means that unless you devote yourself to God and become pure, i.e. small children, you're not going to enter heaven. That would be my guess. That seems to be what it's saying, so this may have something to do with what the tale is. The children have grown up, but they still have the hearts of children. So they're still pure. So that would be my lucky guess. There is a weird background thingy on this that Andersen met a Swedish opera singer named Jenny Land in 1840, and he became infatuated with her, but she was not interested in him romantically, though they did become friends. And according to Carol Rosen, who I'm guessing is somebody who studied Andersen, was inspired to model the icy-hearted Snow Queen after Lind after she rejected him as a suitor. Who knows? Again, Hans Christian Andersen was weird. But yeah, that is it for this. It's a very interesting tale. I personally prefer Frozen, but I could definitely see why on earth they made an entire different movie, because converting this into a Disney princess film would not make any sense. I'll let you out in a minute, Kendra, that cat. So that is the inspiration for Frozen, and I will be covering a few more things with the Snow Queen. I have a children's book, and then I have one more book I think I'm covering with the Snow Queen, and I am covering a few other Frozen things, and we'll be covering African and African American folk tales followed by The Lion King. If you want to check out, I've already done The Frog Princess, and I have opinions on that, so you can check that out. It should be in my playlist somewhere. But otherwise, and then we're covering Merida, which is Brave, in March, and Irish, Scottish fairy tales, and moving on from there. I think we're covering The Little Mermaid in April, and we'll move on. But nonetheless, so if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in escaping with me in 2025 into the world of very interesting fairy tales. Please join me and check out my channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you.